Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah hamdan kathira. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu wa khataman nabiyyin wa rahmatul lil alamin. Wa da'iyan ila Allah bi idnihi wa sirajan munira, amma ba'd. I'm going to tell you tonight about my journey from where I once was as a former Christian youth minister to how I got to where I am now. There's a lot of bumps in the road. You know, it seems pretty clear, yeah, you're a minister and now you're a Muslim, you know, but there's a little bit more to it, inshallah, so just bear with me and hopefully you'll get something out of it, because the point is, at the end, is I want you to get the message behind the story. Because if I was traveling around the country just to tell my story, then I would be wasting time. It's on YouTube. Anyone can go get it from anywhere in the world. So inshallah, we're going to begin at the beginning. I was born and raised in Greenville, South Carolina. And I was raised by my grandparents, because at a very early age my mother had stepped out and my father was working 2 jobs. So it was me and my grandparents. And my grandparents were the traditional, conservative, Southern Christian folk, as they say. They were very, very conservative in their ideals and their ideologies, in their ways. You know, as you hear about, people being set in their ways, that was my grandparents. Like, we did it this way, and this is the way you did it every single day, and that was it. And we were very religious in the sense that we went to church on Sundays, we went to church Sunday evenings, we went to church Wednesday. And in Christianity, that's considered very religious. And it was not hard for us to go to church, and it was not difficult for my grandmother to drag me to church every Sunday, which as a kid is what they had to do, because the church was 2 houses down from our house. There was 2 houses, and then there was the church. So it was not hard for them to drag me every Sunday. And I hated church as a kid because of the simple reason that, we were brought up United Methodist. And Methodist is, for any of you know, it's very traditional. It's not like you think about like screaming and shouting in church and all that. No, you listen to the preacher, you stand up and you sing, you sit back down, you listen to the preacher, you stand up and sing, you sit back down, listen to the preacher, and that's it. That's all that happens. And the pews, as they call them, the chairs are made out of wood, they're hard, you get tired of sitting there, you're fumbling around, playing with the money that my grandmother gave me to put in the offering plate, all of these things. That's what I remember from church as a very small boy. But the thing that I do remember enjoying about church was Sunday school. Sunday school is what I got enjoyment from, because went to Sunday school, you painted pictures, of like Noah building the ark, you painted, all these pictures of Moses splitting the Red Sea. You learned the stories of Moses freeing the children of Israel from Egypt. You learn the story about him splitting the Red Sea. You learn the story about Noah and the ark. You learn the story about David and Goliath. You learn all these beautiful stories in Sunday school. So this was basically, as coming up, this is what I knew about Christianity, was the stories that I learned in Sunday school, because I never listened to the preacher during regular service. So that was the only thing I knew about Christianity. So coming up, this was how it was. It was just the norm. And the conservatism in my house, just to give you an example, and about the level of conservatism is, let's talk about gender issues. Let's say when I became 12, 13, 14, and I started to actually, notice females, and I actually didn't think they had diseases and wanted to run away from them every time I saw them. Let's say I wanted to have a girl over or something of this nature. It was so serious to my grandmother that I had to make an appointment with her, let her know this girl was coming to my house. We had to sit in the formal living room, which in the South, I don't know how it is here, but you have the dining room, then you have the formal living room with all the nice stuff that you don't go in unless there's company over. And my grandmother either had to be sitting in the same room with us or in the kitchen where she could see directly in the room. I mean, this is just how it was in my house. This is how my grandmother and grandfather were. They were very stern. They were very loving, but there were rules, and those rules were the way they were, and they did not change. So this was my upbringing. And I would say at about the age of 12, 13, 14, more along the age 13, 14, I started going to the Saturday evening youth services at my church that were for 12 and up. And the youth services were held in the gym, and they were totally different than church. At the youth services, you went, we played basketball, we played volleyball, we played dodgeball, we played every kind of sport, and we ate pizza and cake and candy, all the stuff kids like to do. And at the end, the youth minister, who happened to be my catty corner neighbor across the street. When I was 14, he was 17. He was the youth minister, so he would sit us down and give us a 30-minute lecture about Christianity, about something about God. He would give us a 30-minute sermon, and that's how the youth services were. And going to these youth services, I met some other people who went to other youth services. They invited me to Young Men for Christ and other things that were going on in South Carolina. And so I started to go to these different retreats and camping trips with them. And so that is when I would say that I started to become a Christian out of will. I became a Christian because I wanted to, not because it was something I was dragged to do. I started to actually want to be Christian. This is something I wanted to do. I made my own choice and my own decision to do it. So when I turned 15, I started going to high school. And when I was a freshman in high school, my best friend, who was the youth minister, was a senior in high school. And I remember we had a very close bond because I had not had my license yet, so I used to ride with him to school every day. And it was a big deal for me to be able to ride to school with a senior, especially since he had a brand new, or it was a brand new, but he had a restored '67 Mustang, which I've always been a fan of cars when I was a kid. So we had a very close bond, and we were very good friends because both of our parents were very similar. They didn't let us do much. So we spent a lot of time with each other. And when I became a sophomore, he graduated and started to attend Bob Jones University. I don't know if that rings a bell with anyone, but Bob Jones University is a very prestigious conservative Christian college in South Carolina. It's probably the most conservative college I've ever seen. Because the Moody Institute is known as one of the most famous in this country since Chicago. But Bob Jones is conservative to the point to where when it comes to men and women, like men and women are not allowed to get caught talking to each other in a room alone if they're not married, holding hands on campus. The men had to wear button-up shirts or polo shirts tucked in with slacks or jeans. The women had to wear skirts. No jeans, skirts that came down to the ankle, and a shirt that came to the wrist. And this was part of the guidelines for Bob Jones University. You didn't party, you didn't drink, there was none of this that happened at Bob Jones University. And he started going there, and his major was textual criticism. And textual criticism probably doesn't ring a bell with anyone, and to explain it in detail would probably take another entire lecture. But just to give you a brief synopsis of what is textual criticism. A textual critic takes the ancient manuscripts of the Bible, the pieces of parchment that were found all over the world, and he has to learn Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, Latin, these languages that these parchments have been found in. And he has to take these scriptures and try to find out where they came from, why there are variations in the many different versions of the same parchment. Let's say you have Matthew chapter 1 from the Bible. There might be 5,000 different variant readings of Matthew chapter 1 in 6 languages. And so he has to be able to take all these and sift through them, try to find out why there's so many variations of the readings, and then determine which one is the original. And that's not as easy a task as it seems. You could figure, which whenever the oldest is probably a more original, which is not the case since there are no originals. You might have one parchment that is the oldest parchment of the group, but it might be a copy of 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 a copy laden with mistakes. And then you might have the newest parchment in the series that might be a once over copy from an original, or a twice over second copy from an original. Therefore, it would make the newer parchment more original than the older one. So it's not a very easy field to go into. And he started studying textual criticism, and being that I was his best friend, I started studying textual criticism. Whenever he was, doing his homework or research papers, I was right there with him. Whenever he did a homework, he would always let me read it. Or when he finished his papers, he would give them to me. He would pass down all of his papers to me. Every textbook, when he was done with it, he would give it to me. I started to learn a little bit of Greek, a little bit of Hebrew. So I became, started to become a layman's textual critic, and I applied to Bob Jones University in my sophomore year because it was a 3-year waiting process for Bob